Okay. We are live. We are broadcasting for everyone who watches on Facebook after another hiccup that we've
Oh,
had yesterday.
exactly.
But we are here. We are here again today. And we are going to catch up where we left last time because we were talking about resilience. That was going to be our topic. Then we had a few hiccups with the stream and apparently it didn't work and no one could watch it.
Yeah.
And then yesterday we had some sound problems and no one could hear Dorothy. So we've had a few hiccups here, but we are resilient.
Yes,
We've
exactly. That's what I
persisted.
wanted to say. Here
We've
it is.
persisted. So we are here. And for those of you who have not joined us yet, you can go back in our page and see a little bit more about Dorothy. We are doing a little thing with a Wellbeing corner where we just spend a few minutes talking about well-being. And the first topic we wanted to discuss is resilience, because this is a word that is a big buzzword in veterinary medicine right now, but it is sometimes very difficult to understand what it is that we're actually talking about. So I'm going to start with that very simple and maybe very difficult question, which is, Dorothy, can you explain to us, what is this so-called resilience?
Yeah, resilience. It is a buzzword, I think, in so many industries at the moment. A few good years ago, I think people didn't really resonate. They didn't even some areas didn't even know so much about resilience. But right now, it has become such a important topic, and everyone is talking about resilience to the point that some people are even fed up with resilience and they don't want more resilience.
Yeah.
But yeah, what is resilience is literally a capacity to recover from challenging circumstances. So it's a capacity to bounce back and cope emotionally, mentally, physically with challenges and be able to bounce back into a space of, I don't know, well-being, balance, and well-being and balance. That's really what resilience is. And I think the first time the word actually has been used is when we talk about the substance that can be we can put pressure on, and then, for example, like the ball, isn't it? Like the ball, we can put
Mm-hmm.
pressure on the ball and the ball springs back to its natural shape. So
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly what resilience is. That sometimes challenging situations happen, we get tension and stress. It feels like, that situation is really kind of crunching on us, but there
Mm-hmm.
is a capacity within all of us to come back to our natural state of balance and well-being.
Why do you think that it is that some people struggle to go back to that state, and they get crunched up and crumbled, and then they can't really come out of that, so they don't really show a lot of resilience, and they struggle and they stay in this place where they are struggling? That's just what is happening to them because they're all squished.
Yeah. Yes, it does happen. I think, it does happen to all of us that sometimes we get squished by what is happening. Um, I think, chatting to people, we've all had those circumstances that for some reason were really challenging for us and gave us that pinch or pinching us, and squishing us. But exactly, some people, it seems, they have capacity to come back to this natural state much quicker. And for some people, it takes them a little bit longer. So there are differences. And that is really interesting in itself, isn't it? What is really going on? And I think last time we chatted, Andrea, I remember I was telling you about the study.
Yep.
Actually, few studies showing at people who encounter in their lives a specific challenge, and they looked at the population of those people and look at actually how many people developed chronic stress, post-traumatic stress disorder, for example, and how many people moved on with their lives and got back to that natural state. And I've looked at the range of studies, and it says that people who go into suffering and that kind of crunched state and unresilient state, there's not a lot of them, actually, from 6% to 25%, depending on the actual challenge,
Mm-hmm.
different groups. So 6%, 25%. So the rest, kind of going through the same challenge, will move on, without suffering the burden of chronic stress and such a strong adversity.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. And what those studies also showed, that the difference between the people who are more resilient and those who suffer a little bit more is what kind of meaning has been assigned to this
Mm-hmm.
particular challenge. So when something happens to us, we make sense out of it. It's all about the mind. Again, in the mind, we make sense what happened, and we make meaning. We make it mean something about ourselves. We make it mean something about others, and sometimes the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
And then we carry that meaning with us. And very often with challenging situations, that meaning that we ascribe, it's not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It, it's actually that perspective, that meaning is very limited, and very often people get stuck onto that meaning that is absolutely unhelpful, that it's actually quite negative. They carry it, and that really kind of bears a heavy weight on them. And they cannot see themselves with clarity because they see themselves with that burden. and
Mm-hmm.
that and that's the main difference, and that's why we talk about the mind, because the making sense, making meaning, it all
Mm-hmm.
happens in our mind, that kind of invisible, amazing,
Yeah.
I don't know,
S-
computer that we
mhm,
all
that-
use.
So,
Yeah.
so I guess this really explains why we have people that, when they are exposed to the same situation, they respond very differently, because they just give different meanings to that. And what may be stressful for one person is not stressful for another person. Which I think is very hopeful, because it literally means that it is up to us to change that, right? It's
Yeah.
almost our responsibility, and it's something that is within our power. What would you tell people who now suddenly realize that, we can improve our resilience by changing a bit our perspective on things, or at least understanding what is our perspective? What would you
Mhm.
recommend to those people in terms of how they could develop this, how they could actively work on this and gain this understanding for themselves?
Mhm. Mhm. So, in I always say, come and join our workshop, the webinar, because I'll be talking a little bit more about it. And
Yes.
for me, what is really helpful for people is to understand what's happening in the mind in the context of change. And once people understand it, they are much more capable of actually seeing what is happening and having a choice. So they will see that they have a choice. They have a choice. They will see how unhelpful meaning they have developed. This is completely innocently, and how this burdens on them. And but through that process of understanding what's happening here in themselves,
Mm-hmm.
they will know that that is not necessary. They don't have to carry that meaning with them. So yeah, there is a whole process that people go through to learn to be able to see that. But for anyone who is probably maybe going through some challenging circumstances right now, I would say that if you are feeling stressed, if you are feeling stuck, I would like you to probably take a little bit of paper and write down a little reflection. What is going on for you right now? How are you perceiving the situation right now? And then you can look what you've written, and you can be kind of looking from some perspective of what you've written, and kind of identify some statements that you've written. You may already see that they not fully the truth, because very often when we go through challenges, our mind generalizes everything, and and that becomes our perspective, and we can get stuck into thinking the same things over and over, and even kind of that narrative goes round and round in our minds. And I think it's so important to capture that narrative, and sometimes writing it on the paper is actually helps. It helps because we can see it, and we can start looking at those statements with more perspective, and really question it, and ask yourself, like, is that true? 100%, is that true? So we can start developing a little perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing that, a lot of the times what we in those moments think, it's not 100% truth. It's some generalizations that we've made, and it's nice to get perspective on that. So I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if this is helpful, but this is the first kind of little exercise that people could try.
Yeah. Uh,
And also ask for help, because sometimes it's really difficult to make sense of all of it on your own, and with support is so much easier.
I was going to say that this sounds like a really first step into something that is much more longer lasting, because we're talking about identifying the story. And then I assume that there's all of this work that maybe we're going to talk about on the next session. And we're most likely, I'm sure we're going to go over this on the webinar that we are doing on the 14th of April.
Yeah.
Which is then, once you know the story, you need to tell a different story, right? um,
Actually, what we are doing, we are not necessarily trying to change the story, and we are trying to create a perspective. And so this is different than positive thinking and also reframing. So trying to reframe immediately the story. So the work is a little bit different, because it's about helping people see their thinking processes from some perspective,
yes.
and really learning about those thinking processes. What is the function, how that thought actually works? Because in that process, the reshifting and reframing happens on its own. And that's
Yeah.
the most exciting, that actually we don't have to keep reframing. That
Yeah.
reframe, with understanding it with perspective, happens on its own. And suddenly the moment comes that we are not so hijacked by that unhelpful story, but we are much more open to seeing that situation clearly. And from that perspective, we start to see it differently. So I don't know. That
Different, yes.
is
Yeah,
yeah.
it's more the way you explained it makes me feel more like what we're trying to do is we're trying to gain a bit of distance from the situation ourselves. So basically, it's not personal almost,
Yeah.
which means we can obviously have a different notion of what is happening to us and make different decisions about it as well, because we're not going to be almost like protecting ourselves, because we gain distance from that thing.
Yes, yes. Getting distance from the events, getting
Yeah.
distance perspective on your internal thinking processes. And then from that, you have much more perspective to realize your own, actually, that perspective and that space, that distancing gives you space to, guess what? Come back to your normal state. Is like that space, that perspective gives us space to spring back to
Yep.
ourselves, to our
Yeah.
well-being. And from that place, we see the situation differently, we start acting differently, we make much better decisions for ourselves, and actually we come back to our own well-being and resilience.
Yep.
So that's the process. That perspective gives us space to come back to ourselves. And this is so beautiful to see, in people that I work, beautiful to see that natural kind of coming back, that, the squash ball coming back to the natural, healthy and happy shape. So yeah, we all, there is that capacity within all of us, literally all of us. I've seen people going through really difficult circumstances, and guess what? Sometimes with a little bit of support, we all can come back to our best selves, and really navigate life from that place. It's so much easier. It's so much more fun. Much better.
Yeah. I again, Dorothy, thank you so much for joining us again.
Yeah.
Next week, we're going to continue the discussion, but we're not going to do it on the Friday. We're going to aim for the Thursday again at half
Yes.
one, like we have been trying for the last 2 or 3 weeks already.
Yeah.
But so we will keep expanding a little bit on that. For those of you who are watching, I think at the end of the session, I can put a link for the webinar. So not only have the Wellbeing Corner every week on Thursdays, we will also have a bit of a longer webinar that will work a bit like a workshop, so that we can go a little bit deeper and also a little bit more interactively with the different steps for general well-being. So today we just talk a little bit about resilience, which is a small little part of everything. But I think a lot of things will apply to every single person here, but particularly as vets who are the people watching this, since there's so much going on in our lives and so many difficulties that we end up addressing. So Dorothy, thank you again a million times for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
We'll be seeing you next week as well. And I think we'll be hearing from you in our page and in our events and everything.
Yeah. So I'll be around there, and I always say, please join the conversation, post questions, tell us what is the most important for you, what would you like to learn. We would love to hear from you. But it's a pleasure. Lovely to see you, Andrea. I love those little corners.
Yes, I love them too. Thank you so much. Right. Thank you so much for everyone that has watched. We'll be here next week, Thursday at 1:30. Take care.
Fantastic. Take care. Have a good Friday. Bye.
You too.